this point, we're going to be joined by our special guest, David Steenson. He's running in the Libertarian Party as a candidate for Washington. Hey, David, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Mack. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. So before we get started, I just want to give you an opportunity. Can you tell my listeners what district you're running for and what position?
Yes, I'm running in District 19, running for position 1 for state representative. Yeah, out of Longview. I live in Longview.
Yes, sir. So who's the incumbent that you're running against right now?
I'm going to be taking on Dean Tacko.
I see. And is he a Democrat?
He is a Democrat, yes, sir.
Okay. So, with that said, I know you probably listened to my interview with Paul Addis. I have a lot of the same questions for you, just myself. I'm curious, specifically, what are some of the big issues that you're bringing to the table? What are things that most concern you and you're running on in your campaign?
Well, the biggest thing is the intrusion of our government into our family lives, our businesses, our schools. Job creation is a definite number one priority with me. My opponent over the past several years has done little to nothing for businesses in my district. His rating is right now at 10% on a scale of 1 to 100%, 100% being the best legislative representative to support businesses, and Dean Tacko currently is at the bottom of that totem pole.
Yes, sir. So what in particular would you do different to create jobs?
I would interact more with our businesses within the district, create new methods, new ways to engage our citizens of our community and the businesses, get with our farmers and find out what programs we can have offered through the schools. And if they're not sufficient enough, develop new programs so we can get high school kids out there working and interacting with farming, with our mills, our lumber mills, and our shipping lanes. There are a lot of opportunities, and right now, government squashes a lot of that opportunities with overabundance in regulations.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. We see that we're getting basically a noose tightened around our neck every year. It seems to get tighter and tighter. The foot of the government is basically stepping on our neck, and we're being restricted. We're being so limited and restricted now that it is costing jobs. With things like Obamacare and all the regulations coming down from the EPA and whatnot. It just makes it really difficult to start a business, to run your business. Things like the minimum wage and whatnot. What's your opinion of the minimum wage? What happened in Seattle?
Well, I believe that minimum wage there shouldn't be a minimum wage. If you as an individual go to an employer and he offers you $8 and you feel you're not worth $8, then you seek other employment. Putting minimum wage, such as they did in Seattle, starts to it'll stifle business. Some business owners may not be able to afford $15 an hour per person. And also there's a lot of other hidden factors that come in, like unemployment insurance. These are other things that are going to increase for a small business. The individuals that are wanting the $15 an hour generally probably ought to look at putting some time into the business, learning the skill, mastering it, and then going from there. All of us have started out at the bottom and worked our way up. It's pretty unfair if you've got an employee and you're in one of those areas that's been there for 10, 15 years and they're making $16 an hour, and then all of a sudden the city council ups the ante to $15 an hour for a minimum wage. That's if people are talking about fair, I don't see that there's a fairness in that. But then again, fairness is only going to be what the individual thinks fair is. Just because they say $15 an hour, why didn't they go to $25 an hour? Or better yet, why not go to $100 an hour? I mean, if we're sitting there looking at a small group of individuals that think they are owed a certain price, then That's not correct. They're not. Everybody has to work from the bottom up. Everybody has to pay their dues and get their feet wet. I've done it. I'm sure you've done it. It's a hard struggle, but one that can be rewarding in the end. So I would say that I disagree with any minimum wage whatsoever, and that's up to the individual. Go to an employer. If that employer doesn't pay you what you think you're worth, then I suggest looking at a different employment option.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I've always heard, and I have to agree with the whole philosophy that you cannot regulate or enforce any kind of fairness. It's just not possible, because when you start trying to regulate fairness, you end up becoming unfair to somebody else. Like, for example, the minimum wage. First of all, these people are basically saying that they're entitled to this amount of money. In my personal opinion, you're entitled to nothing. The only thing that you're entitled to is a fair chance. You're entitled to basically, put your all into something. And if you fail, you fail. If you win, you win. I mean, this is just life. When you take out all the risk and you start, saying that people are entitled to this amount of money and you have to pay this amount of money, or even in terms of Obamacare, you say you're entitled to government health care. Okay, you're entitled to health care. That means that you're entitled to that doctor's time. And with that said, I mean, how do you say that you're entitled to somebody else's time, somebody else's money? Those aren't entitlements. Those are not rights. Those are things that aren't fair. The fairness there of what somebody else, I guess, is subjective, is what you were saying. It depends on whose view you're looking at it. Because now that doctor, I'm sure it's not fair to that doctor that now he has to give up some of his time for free or for less than it's worth, or for that employer who's now employing somebody at $15 an hour when that person isn't worth that much money to them. So, fairness cannot be regulated, just like morality should not be regulated. In my opinion, I don't think that we should be trying to regulate morality through acts of prohibition and things like that, like we did back in the 1920s, and like we're doing with drugs now. What's your opinion on the war on drugs?
I believe we shouldn't have a war on drugs. An individual decides he wants to smoke a bowl or a joint after work or in his privacy of his own home, that's his business. That's not my business. If it doesn't affect the life or limbs of other individuals, then by gosh, go ahead and do it. You're not going to affect me any. It's no different than saying you want to go to the bar after work and pop a top, but yet you can't leave your job and head home in the car and pop a top and drink a cold one on your way home. So it's about control. And if the government can control you and the citizens allow them to be controlled, then who's going to speak up? I mean, it's going to get so bad that individuals will finally come together like they're beginning to do now. Enough is enough. We don't need their control. If we're given the responsibility and we're supposed to be cognizant enough to be able to vote for a representative or a president, then we should be able to make certain decisions as far as what light bulbs we put in our home, what toilet paper we use, or the type of toilet we decided we want to flush with, or the sheets in our bedrooms, or the cleaning supplies in our laundry room. It's just gotten way out of hand, Mack, and I know that you see it. I'm sure you experience that even with your radio program. You've got certain regulations which, to most, really won't know. They don't experience that. Just like my current job is transportation. I relocate families coast to coast. So we have so many different regulations. They become so become so cumbersome that the smartest person in the room is not going to know them, or will have the time to figure them all out. As one regulation leads to several others in a passage, and those several others will lead to several other more. So it becomes redundant to a point where it's obnoxious, and there's no need for it. We need to simplify our laws. We need to get away from incarcerating nonviolent criminals. If somebody goes out and they sell a dime bag, did they hurt anybody? Did they kill anybody? If they didn't, put them on the street, have them attend a program, and let them go about their business. I mean, everybody wants to excel in life. It's kind of like the immigration amnesty program. People say, well, we want to go ahead and give amnesty to all the illegal immigrants. Well, because they just want to have a better life. Well, that same philosophy could be applied to a criminal breaking into a car. He's doing it because he wants a better life, or the bank robber going in and robbing a bank. He's doing it because he wants a better life. But the thing is it's illegal, and until it's given the chance to be legal on a lot of the drug regulations and laws, then we need to start looking at how do we get our people back out of being incarcerated. Currently, we have over 6.8 million people in the penal system, whether going in or coming out. And that's a heck of a lot of folks we have in our country that are tied up into the penal system.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and we have, I think, last time I checked, it was 330 million Americans in the United States, and we have per capita more prisoners in our prison system than any country in the world. You know, and
that doesn't even include those in court fighting cases or trying to fight themselves out of the case.
Exactly.
It's a money racket.
Yeah, I mean, and we compare the United States to countries like China and Russia, where we hear about like the authoritarian grip that they have on their population. You would assume that there would be more people in prison in those countries, more political prisoners in those prisons. Easily more than what the United States has, especially considering the vast population difference in China compared to the United States, but we don't. We actually, from my last check on it, we have approximately the same amount of prisoners that China does in our prison systems, but China has per capita way more people. Yeah, so it doesn't make sense. I mean, we are the most authoritarian country in the world with these kind of policies that turn people into criminals when there was no victim of that crime. But I totally agree with you on this. The war on drugs. I really liked Ronald Reagan. Obviously, that was before my time, but I like Ronald Reagan. But this is the one real thing that I don't like about Reagan is that he started the war on drugs, and I think it's done more to damage our country than it's done to help. I think that there are already existing laws on the books that make crimes that people do when they're on drugs crimes. I mean, for example, somebody driving under the influence, that's a crime. Somebody stealing something to get drug money, that's already a crime to steal. So I think that the fact of having somebody be arrested for something that didn't violate anyone's rights, the sheer act of doing drugs or buying drugs or something like that there was no victim there. And if they used and then commit a crime, that's already a crime. So why are we going after the drugs? Let's go after the crime. And more importantly too, if you want to be tough on drugs and things like that, we could have enhancements. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was telling me about this idea that he had. I don't know where he got it or if it was original, but we could put an enhancement for a crime. Let's say you steal something and you were on drugs. You could have an additional enhancement for being on drugs while you committed a crime, or something of that nature. It just, to me, it makes sense that we punish the crime, not the victimless crimes right now that we're doing. Those are just filling our prison systems full of people who didn't do anything to violate anyone's rights. So excuse me, Mac, but when you get right down to it, are they any different from illegal aliens coming into this country from all parts and inlets of this continent? They're seeking a better life, aren't they? Aren't they trying to or attempting to seek a better life? It's ridiculous that we have so many people incarcerated. The laws are overcumbersome, and it's just way too much. It's too much for individuals to bear, and it burdens communities. It breaks up families. And when individuals, when they're young people, and they go into these prisons, what are they being surrounded by? Other criminals and hardened criminals. And is that mentorship, or is that giving them new leadership to follow in a direction that would not be suitable in society? Exactly, and there are studies proving that once people go into the prison system, they're very likely to go back into it. And the fact is too is we have a society now where we basically discriminate against people who have served time in prisons, and that could prevent them from getting jobs and things like that. For me, this is just my personal opinion, and I'm curious what you have to say about it, Dave. When we have somebody who's released from jail, that person we're told that person has paid their debt to society. So if they've paid their debt to society, then why are we allowing them to be discriminated on from getting a job, making their life more difficult, and then more likely to go, back into some kind of crime activity, which would put them back in jail? I mean, these kind of things, it creates a cycle, a very repetitive cycle here that we see where people are, first-time offenders, they get put into the system, and now they're in the system in and out continuously.
Well, that's the problem. They come out, they've served their time. If they've had to serve 5 years, 10 years, then they come out and they have to be on probation. You were charged with 10 years. You did your 10 years. That should be the end of it. If you did not commit a felony that involved death, injury, rape, then you should be giving back your rights. You paid your debt to society. You should be able to vote. You should be able to request for a concealed weapons permit. A lot of those things are valid questions, and we need to get people together that are like-minded and say, enough is enough of treating our families and people like this. We're supposed to be a free society, but we're free to a limit. We are in a soft tyranny. And the more regulations they pump out every month, whether it be at state level or federal level, they're there to enhance the criminal system. I mean, they want to make criminals out of small children selling lemonade in say, Atlanta that took place a couple of years ago because the child didn't have a food and health safety certificate to sell lemonade. Those are ridiculous things. It's just like a guy in a subdivision in Colorado hangs a flag, a Betsy Ross flag with the circle of 13 stars. And he's getting a $200 fine for having that flag being flown on his property because he lives in a so-called gated community. It's just ridiculous things. So people need to mind their own business, take care of their own problems first, because every time they point a finger at somebody and what they may be doing, they might want to look. They've got 4 more fingers pointing right back at them. And we need to take care of ourselves before we can work on taking care of other folks. And we need to eliminate a lot of these laws. And a lot of these folks that have come out of the penal system, out of prison or out of jails, they pay their debt to society. They are supposed to be able to get a fresh start all over. If you hamper them and give them remedial jobs of, going, the only job they can get is being a dishwasher for $3.50 an hour. That's not fair. Is that fair? Sure, they should get $5 or $10 or $50. So again, gets right back to what's fair, what's not fair, and who decides what fair is.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely agree with you on that. But obviously, I think there are some concerns with felons or people who have been in the prison system for violent crimes. Getting their firearms back, or other kind of situations where maybe somebody was a pedophile and now they're applying for a job as a school teacher. Certain things like that, I think they shouldn't be allowed to even get out.
There are certain limitations to it, yes.
Exactly, yeah. But in my opinion, if they have in fact served their time and they paid their debt to society, we shouldn't be allowing them to get out of prison if there's any chance whatsoever of them repeating that crime, that act. So
absolutely.
With that said, if we get rid of all these nonviolent drug offenders, we'll have more room in our prisons to actually keep the threats to society in there. But I definitely agree that if somebody has committed, a heinous crime, where they've committed violence or they've victimized a child, something like that, they shouldn't be put in a position where they can, be back in charge of children or something like that. That doesn't make sense. But I definitely don't agree
that wouldn't make sense.
Them being prevented from getting a job elsewhere, another field that would not have anything to do with that and would allow them to reintegrate into our society if they have in fact actually paid their debt. So I think you and I are on the same page with that.
Yes, I think we are, Mack.
Okay, so with that said, I want to move on and actually get to you a little bit, give our listeners an opportunity to basically get to know you. And I'm curious if you could give us a little bit of background on you, Dave.
Yes, I was brought up in a military family. My father was a CW3 in the Army. I joined the military after school and went in the Army, and I also did my 3.5 years in the Army and my 4 years in the Marine Corps. And since then, I've been a contractor. I've been a contractor since 1986. My wife just recently got out of the military, which brought us back here to Longview. She's originally from the area, went to school and born there. I work hard. Like I said, I'm a contractor. On an average week, I employ anywhere between 15 to 20 individuals, and sometimes I use them second time, other times just once in a while. We believe in our Constitution. I took an oath to protect the Constitution and defend it, protect our citizens, and I stand firm with that. Then it bothers me to watch how our government has taken a turn south. To be able to know that our president signed orders to release 36,000 illegal criminals with a minimum of 3 felonies each here last year, over the course of last year, 2,000 of them which were known murderers. Another 18,000 of them were pedophiles and rapists. So those are my concerns, and a lot of those things were driven for me to run as a candidate and to seek office. We need to have individuals that are going to stand for our freedoms and stand for liberty and stand against a tyranny. Right now we're in a soft tyranny, and a lot of folks may not see that. I'm sure they feel it. We have a high inflation, which is being masked. If you go to Walmart, buy Great Value, you're going to be spending $2.96 on a gallon of their milk, but when it's locally manufactured, you're going to be spending almost $4, if not more. And so there's some inflation that's hidden in there. We have a governor that's added 11 cents to our gas tax, and they're proposing to add another $1 here shortly. So what we're spending on fuel now, you can look at it with another added $1 to as applied in tax for some project that neither anybody in my district or your district will be utilizing. They've added a 50-cent cigarette tax, which should be coming in play here shortly. So these are a lot of issues that we have going on. But my primary is getting our young people jobs, bringing jobs into our districts, whether it be District 19, 17, or any other district in the state. We have a high unemployment. Just in the Grays Harbor community, there's a 9.9% unemployment. In my district, it's hitting 7.9 to 8%. You get around the Pacific, Long Beach area, that's high too. That's up in there in the 9 range too. So we've got a lot of unemployment. We've got folks in different food banks that are out collecting food. In one community I know of, there's 26,000 families that are involved in collecting food from these food banks each month, and that's a tremendous amount of families that we're having to have them go to charitable places to collect food. So if that's one community and we start looking at what's going on statewide, we have a big issue. We have a big problem, and it hasn't quite manifested itself fully yet to where it affects every single individual in the state. But it's coming. And,
yes, sir.
With the high inflation that we have, the higher fuel costs, the lack of jobs, and we got people being laid off. We just had a coal mine up in the Chehalis area shut down. There went a good bit of good-paying jobs. We have Bulk Millennium in Longview. We have people protesting about exporting of coal. Coal's been exported out of that area for over 100 years. The company and the state are working on cleaning up the remnants of what was left behind by Reynolds Aluminum, and it can bring jobs to our area. And we got to look at what can we do for our children, because our children are going to be the next phase of seeking jobs. And if we can't get our young people employed, how are we going to look at getting our children jobs when they come out of school?
Well, I couldn't agree more with you on that, and I think that the people in Seattle are going to see more and more trouble, basically, from more and more unemployment, more and more unemployed youths because of the new $15 minimum wage. There's talk of making that statewide. It's very concerning to me because of exactly the things you're talking about. It's hard enough as it is. We have in America right now, we have a real problem. I mean, 1 in 6 Americans go to bed hungry. That is a real problem, and the answer is not more government to that. I believe that the answer is less government. So I think we're on the same page with that, and I appreciate where you stand on that. And I'm curious, specifically in terms of you, what experiences or qualifications do you think that you possess that make you uniquely qualified for this position, more so than the incumbent?
Well, I've owned businesses. Currently, like I said, I'm a contractor. I've had a computer company, a technology company. I've also, my last few years with my wife, with her being in the service, I was a family readiness group leader. I was elected to that position. We brought that organization where it had little to no funds to where it met all regulations for that company as far as funding goes for the family readiness group. I've worked with over 480 different families, military dependents. My family's real pro-military. And we've seen a lot of different changes take place to businesses. I'm familiar with what it takes to make a payroll. My incumbent, my opponent, has he ever had a business? Nothing that I see indicates he's had his own business or ever had to meet a payroll. But yet he's there wanting to raise taxes every time we turn around. So I know what the burden is on the business person. I know that burden. I've been there. And I have to deal with it every day. My average person that works for me makes $15 an hour. The young men that I have in the Seattle area that we're making $15 an hour are probably going to want $25 an hour now, because why they're going to compare it to why should some guy at McDonald's make $15 an hour when they're out having to move furniture for $15 an hour. So they're going to weigh it based on the level of work they put in, physical labor, experience. So I hope that it does not go statewide, this $15 minimum wage. If it does, you're going to look at burgers going up. I mean, you go to Mickey D's there, McDonald's. You're spending right now $1 menu will turn into a $5 menu. I mean, the impact is going to be unbearable to most families. Go to Walmart, bananas now, 64 cents a pound? They'll go up. They'll be over $1. You'll be spending $8, $9, $10 for a gallon of milk just to cover Walmart employees' wages. If it goes up to $15 an hour, that's a heavy burden to place on our state at a time when economically our country is not doing well. If we want to utilize the U3 rating for unemployment, it says we're at 7.2%. But if we use the unemployment ratings that were taking place back in the 80s, we would be well over 24% unemployed in this country. We're talking, almost 90 million people to 100 million people are unemployed, out of work, or no longer looking for work. That's incredible. And these are more than capable adults that could get out here and find a job. But with the amount of regulations and stipulations that government's placing on business for health care, taxes, who's going to hire them?
Yeah. I definitely agree. There's so much things going on, and I imagine a lot of this is what drove you into politics and drove you to run for office in the first place. But I'm curious. With your being in the Libertarian Party, I'm just curious if before at one point you were a Republican or maybe a Democrat, or what made you decide to run specifically for the Libertarian Party and rather than being like a Republican or Democrat?
Well, I come from a Democratic family. I knew I was a Republican, and I was a Republican for 32 years. But I see in the Republican Party, as well as in the Democrat Party, the Democrat Party is not my father's Democrat Party that he grew up with, nor my grandfather's. And the Republican Party is not what I knew over the past 32 years. We have progressives that infiltrated both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. And their complete agenda is socialism and communism and control of you, me and the rest of our citizens. So picking libertarian was an easy choice. They're about the individual having freedom, limiting government's intrusion into our lives, getting government out of our bedrooms, our schools, our local businesses, out of our churches, out of marriage, giving the individual their own power that they already have, reigniting that constitution within each individual, saying, hey, I'm free. I'm free to make cognate choices that do not affect the lives of other people, but my own, and I take responsibility for that. And we need people to step up and take responsibility for themselves. If they're down and out, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and move along. Go to your family, and if your family can't help you, go to your church, go to your friends. They'll help you. Don't depend on government to give you a helping hand. And we used to do that in this country. People depended on themselves, on their families, and on their community, not the government. And the more people depend on the government, the more of a thumbhold that the government has on the individual.
Yes,
so
sir.
those are driving factors why I went with the Libertarian Party. They fit all current positions I hold. I don't think government needs to be dictating who can marry who. That's up to a church. That's up to the individual. That would be like asking me about abortion. That's not my choice. I'm a male. That's the female's choice. Get government out of it. Let the female and her family and her doctor decide what's best for her. I'm a male. I could never, deal with the emotional pressure that comes with such a choice. So getting government out of our lives and getting government back to doing what it's supposed to do, protecting our borders, protecting the interest of the United States, and let our states protect their borders, and let our communities provide jobs, educate our children the way the individuals in our community want that to be done. And that would take us right into Common Core. So a lot of questions I know that you have, Mack, and I'm free to answer any one of them or at least give my opinion on it anyway.
Well, I love your answers to this, and you make for great radio. I ask a question, and you just got so much information for the listeners out there, and I sure do appreciate it. But hey, Dave, we got to take a quick commercial break. Would you mind sticking with us? I'm really enjoying talking with you.
Certainly, I have plenty of time. Thanks, Matt.
All right, well, thank you. We'll be back with more Dave Steenson when we come back, and don't go anywhere, everybody.
Support On the Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
And we're back. I appreciate you all sticking with us. When we last left, we had David Steenson on the line. He's a Libertarian Party candidate here in Washington State. And we're going through the issues here and just asking him a series of questions to kind of find out where he stands. I want you guys to basically be able to get involved and get as much information as possible. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask, feel free to join the conversation. The number to today's show is 619-924-0986, or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com. And at this point, we're going to bring Dave back on the line here. And are you there, Dave?
Yes, we are.
All righty. So, I wanted to ask you, because I know before we were talking about how big the government is, how complicated the laws have been, and how basically difficult it is for the average individual to understand what's going on. And we can relate this to the tax code and how we have, armies of lawyers in the IRS and tax agents that are basically writing this code that no one could possibly sit down and understand at all. So, what's your opinion of the current tax system that we have here, and do you think that there would be a better one that we could employ?
Yes, I think our current tax system is overcumbersome. It doesn't do what it should be doing, and it's grown so much, like you were stating. A CPA that has been doing accounting for years and years finds it difficult to research and find certain deductions. There are so many different deductions for individuals that it becomes redundant, and we need to look at eliminating the IRS altogether. We don't need it. We can go to a simpler solution. I have ideals on a tax solution that may not fall within some people's parameters, but prior to the 1900s, did we as individuals pay federal tax? No. Did our country survive? Yes. Did we have to depend on government for roads? And no, those should be state-driven initiatives that I think the government needs to be out of that. We need to get the government out of what we do as individuals. They need to do what they're supposed to be doing, protecting our borders and the interests of the United States.
So just to clarify, though, when you're talking about the government out of our interest as far as building roads and things like that and collecting tax money for these things, are you referring to the state government as well, or is that particularly relating to the federal government?
That's relating to the federal government. The state has its boundaries, and the state should not give in to the federal government. In fact, states should be controlling what the federal government does. We as citizens should be controlling what the federal government does. And we do that through our local initiatives, through our state, and our representatives need to put the hammer down on the federal government and say, hey, enough's enough. You're not going to be doing this. And we need to get delegates together. We need to support Article 5 of the Constitution, and we need to get term limits on these individuals, because the longer they're in government, they create rules and regulations and laws that kind of keep them in place. And it's ridiculous. I mean, 1951, FDR ran for a fourth term and won, but, passed away, didn't complete it. But, in 1951, they wrote regulations that kept presidents just at 2 terms. But Congress did not write their regulations to hamper how long they can be in.
Yeah,
so we need to have term limits.
I think that they realized after that they almost slipped into a situation where it was like a dynasty, an empire of sorts, and they realized the problem. FDR was a progressive. I'll just point out, and
he
the
was.
progressive ideology. They don't follow suit with what George Washington did as far as voluntarily giving up power. Progressives, they take power. They take more and more power. They create bigger governments. These whole philosophies of the party, of the movement, of the progressive movement, it's the whole creation of government becoming the answer to the problem in which they created in the first place. So I definitely agree with the sovereignty of states, but we've lost a lot of state sovereignty. I'm sure you mentioned Article 5, of the Constitution, but I'm sure that we have basically lost with the 17th Amendment, where the Senate used to be voted on based on the state representatives, the state legislators used to decide who was in the U.S. Senate, and now the 17th Amendment passed, and boom, now it's voted on by the people. We have double representation. States lost a lot of their sovereignty, a lot of their ability to poke back. And you mentioned Article 5, like I was saying. Article 5 of the Constitution, for our listeners, basically says of ways to amend the Constitution, and it talks about a state convention where states can come together and basically vote on amendments to the Constitution. And Mark Levin, I'm sure you're familiar with him. He has a book, The Liberty Amendments. Feel free to check it out. It's on our website if you want to purchase it, OnTheMoveShow.com, in the shop link in the gear section. But there's a lot of different things that are beneficial about Article 5, is that we can bring this country back to a more constitutional republic. We can get our states' sovereignty back by proposing these amendments. And the great thing about it is it only takes 14 states to block an amendment. If we cannot get 14 states together to block an amendment from a runaway state convention, then we have already lost, as I've already said, and Mark Levin has already said. And I would rather know if we've lost our country now than our country later when it gets much worse.
Here's the thing to that, Mac. If Congress, let's say, and the House is taken by the progressive Democrats and the Senate is taken hold and remains in the Democrats' hands, what stops them for introducing proposals or bills to allow the president to go for a third term? There'll be nothing to stop that, even though the law's already in the books. But who's going to stop that? If you get 2/3 of the vote of the House and of the Senate, he's got it. And this is where the delegates come in from the states. Article 5 is that we need 2/3 of the states. They can ratify new articles, set term limit, and can override what the House and Senate does.
Exactly.
And this gives control back to the states and those citizens of our state. And so we need to push that agenda forward and get a grip on these folks and pull back on the reins and put it back in their tracks. They are our servants. And when you go into public office, you're a servant of the people. And that was reflective a lot prior to 1901, where you look at a lot of the voting record, when you look at a lot of the state reps and the Congress and Senate, they served one term. And if they had to go the second term, usually it was because they couldn't find anybody to replace them in the first term. But after the Woodrow Wilson, the Progressive Party movement, things changed. It becoming more of a career politician was the way for folks to go. Right now we have in the state of Michigan, Carl Levin. He's been a senator over 40 years. There's another senator that has over 40 years as well. These folks have made a career of politics, and they don't need to be there. The whole intent of our framers were to get folks in there that represent their communities. They still had their own jobs. They had businesses or worked for somebody. They went there for one term and returned back to their business, their farms, and whatever they were doing prior to running for office. And that's what we need. We need more citizen politicians. We don't need career politicians.
Well said. Well said. So with that said, David, where can my listeners go to get more information about you, volunteer, specifically to your campaign, and what exactly would you like them to do? What do you need help with?
Well, we need volunteers to go out and with me and knock on doors. I also need donations. To run a campaign without donations can be difficult, but it can be done. And I'm not looking to seek donations from corporate entities. One of our libertarian philosophies is if we start getting revenue or donations from corporate businesses, folks tend to feel like they have an obligation to that business. I have an obligation to all businesses. I have an obligation to bring business and grow business in our communities and make sure we have regulations for this business. And not one business should be treated differently than another. It's kind of like me moving furniture. If I move the guy that pushes a broom in a business, I treat him no different than I would the CEO or the owner of the business. Give them both the same respect equally, and you do the right job. And so as far as donations go, yes, I'll take them. We need them. And mostly I'm looking for volunteers to help knock on doors and get our message out there. You can find me at www.votesteenson.com, or you can on Facebook at Vote Steenson, or Facebook at david.steenson.7. And 7 was not something I did. That was Facebook.
How do you spell?
3 avenues.
Just so the listeners know, how do you spell Steenson? It's like Steenson, right?
That is correct.
Okay, just making sure. So with that said, people check out his website. If you want to get involved, make sure you get in contact with him, or if you don't know how for some reason you can't get in contact with him, contact me. I'll put you in contact with him. And I just have one last question for you, David.
Yes,
I know running for political office, you've had to have made certain sacrifices. More importantly, obviously, your time. But what other kind of sacrifices have you made in order to run for office?
Well, my sacrifices are minuscule compared to the veterans that have served our country, to the veterans and service members that are currently serving. I mean, we've got men and women out there that have given life, leg, and limb to secure our freedoms here in this country, and to see such respect being given towards them, whether it be the VA or sitting there watching Iraq do what it's doing after we've spent countless amount of years since '93 in that area, to sit here and watch it fall apart. Those things are dishonoring to our veterans, and what the VA has been doing is dishonoring to our veterans. There are good people that work at VA, the volunteers. I don't want to take anything from them, but there's a management problem. And I, as a participant in the VA, I too get those delays. So I'm fully aware of what my brothers and sisters in the military are going through, our former vets. And it's not good. So what I've sacrificed is nothing compared to what my fellow military members are going through and have gone through. I never served downrange. My wife was active military as well. I've seen a lot of families, husbands and wives, go downrange, and I've had to deal with it on the FRG end of it. It is can be quite depressing at times, but we pick our head up. One thing about service members, we'll always pick ourselves up. We can move forward. In the Marine Corps, our motto was do as much as you can with little that you get, and that's what we do. And I apply that motto to this day. Do as much as I possibly can with as little that I may have. And
yes, sir.
I would encourage all service members and veterans. We can make a change. We can force this government to take heed to our service, and we serve this country with honor. We serve this country for the rights and freedoms of others. And citizens that didn't serve, that contribute to our service members, bless them as well. We need them too. But what's happening here in this country now, it's disgusting.
I have to agree. We definitely feel it every day. The federal government encroaching more and more on our liberties. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. And more importantly, thank you for your service. I absolutely appreciate that. And it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you, David. You're welcome on anytime.
Anytime, Mack. You just let me know.
All righty. Well, thanks again.